They told me the hallucinogens in the riverweed tea caused a localized psychotic break. They told me the human brain, when starved of oxygen under 12 feet of black water, will invent a mother, a sister, a savior, or a god just to keep from shutting down. But they didn't see the bruises on my wrists. They didn't feel the fingers closing around my bone. Let's start where the rot started. Through the swipe of the wiper blades, Blackwater Lodge rose out of the hemlocks. It was a massive Victorian monstrosity of dark granite and rusted iron filigree built on a cliffside overlooking the Blackwater Reservoir. I hated it immediately. I hated the way the wet slate roofs looked like the scales of a submerged reptile. I hated the fact that I was here. The air up here smells like wet basement and iron. Julian's checks cleared, which is the only reason I am putting my boots on this floorboards. My task is simple. Catalog the pre-flood maps of the valley before the Historical Society loses its rights, and Julian's demolition crews turn this place into a luxury resort. 5 days. Then I take the brass urn in my duffel bag, drop it into the grey water, and never look back. I slam the car door, the sound swallowed instantly by the vast dead silence of the woods. My duffel bag felt unnecessarily heavy. Inside, wrapped in 3 layers of sweaters, was the heavy cylindrical urn containing what was left of Clara. "Mr. Vance?" The voice was thin, dry, and scraped against my nerves. An old man stood in the heavy oak doorway of the lodge. He wore an oilskin coat that dripped onto the stone porch. "Gideon, the caretaker." "You're late," he said, not moving to help with my bags. "The lake rises early this time of year. The mist gets in the lungs." "I don't care about the mist, Gideon," I snapped, brushing past him into the grand foyer. My voice sounded sharp, deliberately cruel. It was my armor. If I was nasty enough, people left me alone. If they left me alone, I didn't have to explain why my eyes were always bloodshot. Just show me where the archive boxes are and keep the heat above 60. Gideon closed the door behind us. The lock clicked with a heavy, definitive thud that felt like a cell door closing. "The library is through the gallery," Gideon muttered, his eyes lingering on my duffel bag. "But I'd stay out of the east wing if I were you. The foundations are soft. The water is trying to take the cellar back." The lodge was mostly empty, a cavernous tomb of velvet curtains and dust motes. Julian, the developer, wasn't arriving until later in the week, leaving me alone with Gideon and the skeleton staff. That night, I sat alone in the small dining tavern at the edge of the estate, the only patron under the low, timbered ceilings. The bartender was a young woman with dark hair tied back in a messy bun. Her name tag read Maeve. Unlike Gideon, she didn't look at me like I was a ghost. She looked at me like I was someone who desperately needed a drink. "You look like you've been driving since the turn of the century," she said, sliding a glass of cheap rye toward me. "I'm an archivist," I said coldly, staring down into the amber liquid. "We don't live in the present. It's too loud." From the corner of the tavern, near the hearth, a low laugh bubbled up. It came from a man wrapped in a patchwork coat of wool and canvas. His beard was stained yellow around the mouth, and his fingernails were caked with dark river mud. This was Silas, the town lunatic. "He thinks he's safe up on the rocks." Silas croaked, pointing a crooked finger at me. "He thinks the ink on his old maps keeps his feet dry, but the drowned sister knows who's in the house. She smells the salt on you, mister." "Silas, leave the guest alone, or I'm cutting you off," Maeve said, her voice dropping into a firm, protective register. "What the hell is he talking about?" I muttered, taking a long, burning gulp of the rye. Local nonsense, Maeve sighed, wiping down the bar with a rag. When they built the dam in 74, they flooded the old valley town. The church, the school, the old homesteads, they're all still down there, preserved by the cold water. The old-timers claim someone didn't get out before the valves opened. They call her the drowned sister. They say she sits in the pews of the sunken church, waiting for the water to rise high enough to pull the rest of the world down with her. Hokum, I spat, the word bitter on my tongue. Drowning isn't a ghost story, it's just mechanics. Lungs fill with water, the brain starves, the lights go out. There's no magic to it. Silas stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floorboards. He leaned over my table, the smell of marsh gas and rotting leaves exploding into my face. You know the mechanics well, don't you, boy? He whispered. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, and completely unblinking. You know exactly how long it takes for the bubbles to stop. My heart hit my ribs like a sledgehammer. My grip tightened on the rye glass until my knuckles turned white. He doesn't know, I told myself. He's a crazy old man in a dying town. He doesn't know about the bridge. He doesn't know about Clara. Get out, I whispered, my voice shaking with a rage that was actually pure, unadulterated terror. Maeve stepped out from behind the bar, grabbing Silas by the arm and guiding him firmly toward the door. That's it, Silas. Out. Go back to your van. The door wailed against the wind as Silas was pushed into the night. When Maeve came back, she looked at me with a soft, deeply unsettling empathy. He's harmless, she said softly. But he's right about one thing. This lake, it has a way of making people remember things they spent a lifetime trying to bury. By midnight, the rye hadn't numbed the noise. It had only amplified it. I was in my third-floor room. The walls were covered in faded green wallpaper that peeled away in long, damp strips. The window rattled in its frame, offering a view of the black expanse of the reservoir below. The water didn't reflect the moon. It was just an abyss. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the sound of rushing water. I heard the high, rhythmic clink, clink, clink of a wedding ring striking the inside of a car window. Arthur, Arthur, the door won't open. Shut up, I said to the empty room. Shut up. I opened my duffel bag and pulled out the brass urn. It was cold. I unscrewed the cap and looked inside at the grey, gritty powder. I'm sorry, I whispered. It was a lie. I wasn't sorry enough to have stayed in that car. I was alive. She was dust. That was the math of it. The self-loathing hit me then, a physical weight that pressed down on my chest until I couldn't breathe. It was an old routine. I had carried a length of heavy braided nylon rope in the bottom of my trunk for 2 years. Tonight, the hotel room had an exposed iron structural beam running across the ceiling. It was too perfect. It felt like an invitation. I dragged a heavy mahogany chair under the beam. My hands were steady now, the bizarre, calm stability of a man who has finally decided to pay a debt. I tied the knot, a proper hangman's loop. I threw it over the beam, pulled it taut, and slipped the coarse fibers over my head. The rope smelled like oil and old garage shelves. 10 seconds of panic, I told myself, staring at the peeling wallpaper. Then the pressure on the carotid artery takes care of the rest. No more water. I kicked the chair. The drop was short. The rope snapped tight against my throat with a sickening, wet crunch. The world didn't go black. It turned an aggressive, blinding crimson. My lungs screamed for air that my throat refused to deliver. My legs kicked wildly, hitting nothing but empty space. The iron beam groaned above me. This is it, I thought, a sudden, terrifying realization washing over me. I don't want to die. Oh God, I don't want to die. The door to my room flew open with a violent crash. Through the purple haze of my failing vision, I saw a shape rush toward me. It wasn't Gideon. It was smaller, faster. A flash of silver caught the dim lamplight. It was a long, jagged diving knife. Maeve didn't try to lift me. She threw her weight onto the bed, reached up, and drove the serrated edge of the blade through the nylon rope. The line snapped. I dropped to the floorboards like a sack of wet flour, the noose still tight around my neck. I choked, vomiting a mixture of stomach acid and rye whiskey onto the rug, my chest heaving as air tore down my raw trachea. Maeve dropped to her knees beside me, her hands hovering over my shaking shoulders. She didn't scream. She didn't call for help. She just sat in the dark with me, watching me breathe. The rope always leaves a mark, Arthur, she said, her voice remarkably steady against the sound of my sobbing. But the water never forgets where you left her. When I woke up, the ceiling was white plaster and the air smelled of antiseptic. A regional hospital 40 miles away. The doctors told me I had severe bruising around my larynx, but no structural fractures. They asked me if I wanted to speak to a counselor. I told them to go to hell, signed my own release forms, and took a taxi back to Blackwater Lodge. It had been 3 weeks. My neck was wrapped in a thick wool scarf to hide the jagged, yellowing ring of broken capillaries.